Imagine a friend of yours. Let's call her Sarah. So, Sarah applies for a mortgage. She's got a great job, a really solid salary, and a spotless credit history. But out of nowhere, she gets rejected. And it's an entirely automated decision. There's no explanation, there's no reasoning she can review, and absolutely no human being she can get on the phone to talk to about it. It is a complete and utter black box.
And when she tries to push back and actually asks why, she's met with this incredibly cold, robotic response. The system assessed your application and you don't meet the criteria. Which criteria? Well, they couldn't say. What would she need to change for next time? Again, they couldn't say. It's just this incredibly frustrating experience with zero human accountability, leaving her totally in the dark about why she was turned down. And you know what the most concerning part is? This is not an unusual story anymore. It is literally happening every single day. Okay, let's dive into this. In today's explainer, we're unpacking these automated rejections by looking at 1, the layers of human choice, 2, how bias is baked in, 3, the accountability void, and 4, challenging the algorithm. Starting with Section 1, layers of human choice. So, we really need to deconstruct this myth of the perfectly objective AI. When an AI agent makes a decision about your life, it's actually passing through this giant onion of human choices. It's layers of people you are never, ever going to meet. Step 1 is the base model builders. This is just a handful of massive tech firms building the underlying model and setting its core values. Then step 2, you have product builders. Say a bank. They take that base model and layer on their own specific context, rules, and criteria for what makes a good applicant. And finally, step 3, the deployment teams. These are the folks who actually configure the tool for a specific use case inside the company. So by the time a decision actually reaches you, it is filtered through 3 or 4 completely separate layers of human decisions. And here is the absolute crucial takeaway from all of this. What might feel like neutral mathematical decisions at each of these layers, they're actually totally subjective value judgments. Deciding to heavily weight a postcode over someone's current income isn't just some objective math equation. It inherently reflects a human assumption about what a trustworthy borrower looks like. And unfortunately, those assumptions can be systematically wrong. Which brings us to Section 2, how bias is baked in. Let's slow down for a second here, because this is where the mechanics of these systems get genuinely troubling. AI bias is a term we hear thrown around a ton, but what does it actually mean? Well, bias in AI usually isn't intentional, right? Nobody is sitting in a boardroom saying, hey, let's build a system that discriminates. Instead, AI systems learn from historical data, and historical data reflects the world as it was, with all of its massive flaws, not the world as it should be. And this brilliantly illustrates the core difference between intentional discrimination and historical data bias. Intentional discrimination is purposeful. Historical data bias is passive, sure, but it is just as damaging. Think about it like this. If you train a hiring agent on 10 years of successful hires at a company, and for 10 years that company predominantly hired men for senior roles, the algorithm learns that successful, mathematically, looks male. It wasn't explicitly told to be biased, it just ingested all those past prejudices. And we aren't just guessing here, we have concrete, documented examples of this happening right now. Major companies have found out their recruitment tools were automatically downranking women's CVs because of that male-skewed historical data. We see facial recognition systems that perform significantly worse on darker skin tones, simply because they were trained predominantly on white faces. We even see predictive policing tools flagging certain postcodes as high risk based entirely on historical, totally uneven arrest patterns. The AI effectively encodes historical injustice and then turns around and presents it back to us as this pristine, objective, mathematical analysis. This naturally leads us to Section 3, the accountability void. So when these bias decisions actually happen, who is held responsible? Well, in theory, the bank deploying the system is accountable. But in reality, it's a corporate game of hot potato. The bank says, hey, the system behaved exactly as described. The AI company says, whoa, we just sold a tool. The bank configured it. And the configuration team says, we just followed the manual. Every single party has a perfectly reasonable sounding defense. And the result? Everyone deflects the blame, and the user is left sitting there with no mortgage and zero explanation. And this void isn't just a banking problem, it is absolutely in the workplace too. When companies use AI agents to monitor employee productivity, they almost always fall into the trap of measuring what's easy, not what matters. Take a nurse, for example. An AI measuring strict throughput or tasks per hour might flag a nurse as unproductive simply because they took 10 necessary minutes to comfort a deeply distressed patient. When the algorithm is given the ultimate authority, the flawed metric suddenly becomes the only thing that actually matters.
Moving on to Section 4, Challenging the Algorithm.
Now, I really don't want to leave you feeling helpless after all of that, because you actually have significantly more power here than you might realize. Here's what you can do to protect yourself. First, know your rights. If you're in the UK or the EU and you get an automated decision about credit, insurance, or a job, you have the legal right to request a human review. Use it. Even if it doesn't instantly change the outcome, you are creating a vital paper trail for regulators. Second, ask companies for explanations upfront. Ask your bank, ask your employer if they use automated decision-making. If they can't give you a clear answer, well, that tells you absolutely everything you need to know about their accountability. And third, you've got to engage in the policy conversation, because policy follows pressure. Right now, as we speak, regulations in places like Westminster and Brussels are actively being written. But if the public isn't paying attention, those rules are going to be written almost entirely by the tech companies building the systems rather than the everyday people affected by them. It's a massive conflict of interest. Public pressure from informed users like us is literally the only way to balance the scales.
Because ultimately, the true danger of AI isn't some sci-fi Terminator scenario. It's exactly this idea right here. The real consequences are quiet. They're administrative. The absolute biggest danger is a completely silent decision made about your life by a machine you never saw, accountable to absolutely no one you can reach. So I want to leave you with this really provocative question to chew on. Who is in charge of your next big life decision? Because the people designing these systems aren't waiting around for permission, and honestly, you shouldn't be either. Stay informed, ask the hard questions, and demand that human oversight. We would absolutely love to hear your own stories of dealing with automated rejection, so please share them with us. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I will see you next time.